We live in a world obsessed with noise. The loudest voices, the biggest announcements, the flashiest success stories, they get all the attention. But the truth, real success doesn't scream, it whispers. It doesn't happen on stages, in social media posts or press releases. It happens when no one is watching. In the early mornings, in the late nights, in the quiet, when it's just you, your goal, and the next small move. Success isn't a giant leap. It's a series of tiny steps that compound that no one sees until they do. But here's the hard part, because it's silent, because it's slow, because it's invisible, we start to doubt it. We compare our behind the scenes with everyone else's highlight reel, and we feel like we're losing. But you're not losing. Every move you make in silence, every rep at the gym, every chapter you write, every call you make, every time you choose discipline over distraction is a brick that no one sees until suddenly there's a wall, a foundation, a life you're proud of. So stop chasing the applause. Start mastering the next quiet move, because the ones who win, the ones who truly succeed, they're not the ones making noise. They're the ones making progress. We don't talk enough about where success actually happens. We see the final product, the award, the title, the transformation, the moment someone arrives, but we never really see the process. Not fully. We see glimpses, a photo, a quick story, maybe a timeline that's been compressed into a few bullet points or a 30-second clip. But that's not the truth. That's just the surface. The truth is, real success, the kind that lasts, the kind that means something, happens in silence. It happens when there's no audience, when there's no one cheering you on, when there's no recognition, no trophy, no spotlight. It's in those moments when you're showing up day after day, wondering if it's even working. It's in the early mornings when you get out of bed, not because you feel inspired, but because you made a promise to yourself. It's in the late nights when you're still working, long after everyone else has clocked out, because there's something in you that refuses to settle. Success doesn't show up with fanfare. It doesn't come with applause. It comes quietly, almost unnoticed, like a seed buried in the soil. For a long time, there's nothing to see, but something is happening underneath. Something is taking root, and the people who understand that, the ones who can be patient in the silence, they're the ones who eventually bloom. The problem is we're conditioned to think if no one sees it, it doesn't count. We live in a culture where visibility is everything. If you're not posting it, if you're not broadcasting your grind, it's like it doesn't exist. And that's the trap. That's the reason so many people quit too early, because they're working in silence. And they mistake the quiet for failure. But the quiet isn't failure. The quiet is where the work is being done. The quiet is where you're developing your character. It's where you're building your resilience. It's where you're forming the habits that will carry you when motivation runs out. Silence is not a void. It's not an absence. It's a space where mastery begins, where grit is formed, where confidence is built not by other people's praise, but by your own consistency. Because if you can keep showing up without a pat on the back, if you can keep pushing forward when no one's watching, if you can keep making the next right move without needing anyone to notice, that's power. You see, it's easy to show up when you know someone's watching, when there's recognition waiting on the other side. But what about when there's nothing, when it's just you and the work? That's the test. That's where you learn who you really are. That's where you earn your edge. And it's quiet. It's not glamorous. It's not exciting, but it's real. And that's what makes it powerful. Because when success finally arrives, when the moment finally comes and people say, where did that come from? You'll know exactly where it came from. It came from the silence, from the invisible hours, from the time no one counted, but you did. We tend to overestimate what can happen in a day and underestimate what can happen over months, years, even decades of steady, intentional effort. We look for the big leap, the breakthrough, that one dramatic moment where everything changes. But that's not how real success works. That's not how growth happens. The truth is, it's not about doing something extraordinary once. It's about doing something ordinary consistently over time. It's about taking the next small step again and again until the compound effect becomes undeniable. Think about it. When someone achieves something remarkable, we often ask, what was the secret? We look for a trick, a hack, a shortcut. But if you really sit down with people who've built something meaningful, whether it's a business, a skill, a relationship, a strong body, a deep sense of peace, they'll almost always tell you the same thing. It wasn't one big thing. It was 1,000 small things. over and over again. We don't like that answer. It's not glamorous. It's not marketable, but it's the truth. The magic is in the repetition, in the boring, in the daily. You don't build a great company in one bold decision. You build it through hundreds of tiny ones, each of them intentional, each of them aligned with a greater vision. You don't become fit because of one great workout. You become fit because you moved your body even on the days you didn't feel like it. You don't become wise from one book. You grow wiser because you kept reading, kept learning, kept asking better questions day after day. Small steps seem insignificant in the moment. That's the challenge, because the results are not immediate. You won't see a return today, or maybe not even next week, and that can feel discouraging. It's why people give up. They're doing the work, but they're not seeing the result yet. But success is not instant. It's not loud. It accumulates quietly, silently, until one day it tips. One day the work compounds and everything changes. It's like water dripping on stone. One drop means nothing. 10 drops, still nothing. 100 drops, you see a little moisture. 1,000, 10,000, and now there's erosion. Now the stone is changing shape. But it wasn't one drop that did it. It was all of them. The people who win are not the most talented. They're not the smartest. They're the ones who learned how to stay in motion, who didn't let the smallness of the step diminish its value. They understood that the key isn't doing more, it's doing what matters consistently. And consistency isn't about intensity. It's not about doing everything at once. It's about sustainability. It's about choosing a pace you can maintain. One small move, one better decision, one honest conversation, one workout, 1 hour of deep focus, one small act of courage. These are the things that change lives, but only if we repeat them. You don't need a radical plan. You don't need to change everything overnight. You just need to ask yourself one question. What's the next move I can make today that moves me forward? And then do that, and then do it again tomorrow and the next day. We live in a time where applause has become a currency. We crave recognition. We chase likes, follows, views, and compliments, sometimes more than we chase the actual work. And here's the dangerous part. The applause feels good. It gives us a rush. It feels like momentum. But there's a difference between momentum and validation. And if you're not careful, you'll start doing things not because they're meaningful, but because they're popular. But real growth, real success isn't built on applause. It's built on discipline. Applause is external. It's temporary. Discipline is internal. It lasts. Applause makes you feel seen. Discipline makes you strong. And when the applause fades, and it will, it's discipline that keeps you going. The hardest part of building anything worthwhile is learning to keep going without the praise. To wake up and do the work not because someone is watching, not because someone is rewarding you, but because you made a commitment to yourself, because you know what you're building matters, because you understand that progress isn't about being seen, it's about becoming better. See, discipline is uncomfortable. It demands something from you. It forces you to choose effort over ease, consistency over chaos, purpose over pleasure. And that's not always fun. That's not always exciting. In fact, most of the time it's the opposite. It's mundane, it's repetitive, it's hard. And that's exactly why so few people stay with it. But the people who do, the people who choose discipline over applause, they're the ones who create things that last. They're the ones who build something solid. Because their foundation isn't built on what others think. It's built on who they are. It's built on principles, on standards, on values. They're not swayed by attention or discouraged by silence. They just keep showing up every day, no matter what. When you rely on applause, you become dependent on something outside of your control. You start performing. You shape your work to fit what others want. And that's a dangerous place to be. Because the moment you stop getting the attention, you start questioning your worth. You start wondering if it's even worth doing. And that's when people quit. Not because they couldn't succeed, but because they built their motivation on something fragile. But discipline doesn't care if anyone's watching. Discipline is rooted in purpose. It's built from the inside out. It's what keeps you focused when you're tired, when you're uninspired, when you're doubting everything. It's what makes you unstoppable, not because you're the most talented, but because you're the most consistent. You've trained yourself to do what needs to be done regardless of how you feel. And the irony is, when you focus on discipline, when you stop chasing applause, That's when you start earning real respect. That's when people start noticing, not because you demanded their attention, but because your results speak louder than any post ever could. Success isn't loud. It doesn't beg to be seen. It's quiet. It's steady. It's built in the dark. It's built through choices that no one claps for, through days that feel like they don't count, through sacrifices that no one will ever know about. And that's okay. That's how it's supposed to be. Because the moment you realize that discipline is more powerful than applause, you become free. Free to focus, free to build, free to grow, without needing the world to validate every step. And when the world finally does notice, when the applause eventually comes, and it will, you won't be addicted to it. You'll appreciate it, sure, but you won't need it, because you've already proven to yourself what you're capable of. You didn't do it for the claps, you did it for the cause, one silent move at a time. One of the fastest ways to lose your momentum is to start measuring your journey against someone else's. It's almost impossible to stay focused on your own path when your eyes are constantly drifting to the left and the right, trying to figure out how fast everyone else is going. We do it without even thinking. We scroll through social media, we see someone else's progress, their success, their lifestyle, and we start to wonder if we're behind, if we're doing something wrong, if we're somehow not enough. But what we forget in that moment is that we're comparing their highlight reel to our behind the scenes. Their big moment to our quiet process. That's not a fair comparison. In fact, it's not even real. You don't see the full picture. You don't see their doubts, their failures, the days they almost quit. You only see the result. And if you're not careful, you'll take that filtered, polished version of their life and use it to question the value of your own. That's not only unhelpful, it's dangerous. Because when comparison becomes the lens you look through, you stop honoring your own pace. You stop trusting your process. You start rushing. You start copying. You start abandoning the very things that made your path unique in the first place. Everyone's journey is different. Different starting points, different resources, different battles, and more importantly, different definitions of success. What someone else is chasing might not even matter to you. And yet, because we're wired to compare, we try to keep up with standards that don't even belong to us. We start running a race that was never ours to begin with. But here's the truth, real success is personal. It's not about being ahead of others. It's about being aligned with who you are and where you're going. It's about waking up every day and moving forward, not faster than someone else, just forward from where you were yesterday. That's how you grow. That's how you build something meaningful. Not by outpacing others, but by becoming better than who you were last week, last month, last year. When you stop comparing, you start noticing. You start seeing your progress. You start recognizing the quiet wins, the ones that one else applauds, but that matter deeply to you. You begin to appreciate the slow days, the subtle shifts, the invisible changes that are laying the foundation for something much bigger. And that awareness builds confidence, not the loud kind, but the kind that's steady and rooted in truth. Comparison robs you of that. It tricks you into thinking that what you're doing isn't enough, when in reality, you might be exactly where you need to be. Just because someone else hit their breakthrough doesn't mean you've missed yours. It just means yours is still on the way. And maybe, just maybe, the reason it's taking time is because it's meant to last. Let's be honest, it's hard to ignore the noise. It's hard not to compare. But every time you feel yourself drifting into that mindset, come back to your why. Come back to your mission. Remind yourself what you're building and why it matters. The more you do that, the less you'll be shaken by what others are doing. You don't need to keep up with anyone. You just need to keep going. The only person you're competing with is the version of yourself who didn't know what you know today. And if you're showing up, if you're learning, if you're moving, no matter how slowly, you're winning. You don't need to outshine anyone. You just need to outlast your doubt. Success doesn't show up all at once. It doesn't come crashing through the door with banners and confetti. It builds slowly, quietly, brick by brick. And the truth is, most people won't even notice those bricks being laid. They won't see the early mornings when you got up before the sun. They won't see the nights you spent planning, learning, practicing when you could have been out doing something easier, something more fun. They won't see the small, repeated decisions you made to stay in motion, because those things aren't exciting. They're not flashy, but they matter more than anything. Every time you choose focus over distraction, that's a brick. Every time you show up on a day you didn't feel like it, that's a brick. Every small promise you keep to yourself, that's another one. None of them look like much on their own, but together, they form something unshakable. A structure built from consistency, not from occasional bursts of motivation. The mistake most people make is waiting for a moment that feels big, waiting for some massive opportunity, some dramatic change that signals it's time. But the people who build real, lasting success, they don't wait for the big moment. They create it quietly through the little ones. They understand that greatness isn't found in intensity, it's found in repetition. They know that excellence isn't a single act, it's a habit, a discipline, a rhythm. And here's the thing, those bricks, they're not just progress, they're proof. Proof that you're becoming the kind of person who shows up when it's hard, who keeps moving when no one's clapping, who doesn't need external reward to stay aligned with an internal purpose. You start to realize that the process is the reward, that every act of discipline is building a stronger, more grounded version of you. We live in a world that celebrates the outcome, but the outcome doesn't exist without the process. We see someone standing at the top of the mountain, but we don't see the climb. We don't see the steps. But every single one of those steps mattered. Every one of them was necessary. That's how success works. It's not just the final product, it's every small decision that came before it. And here's the really powerful part, those small moves don't just build results, they build identity. When you take ownership of the small things, you begin to trust yourself more. You start to see yourself as capable, as someone who follows through, as someone who can be relied on not by others, but by you. That's where real confidence comes from, not from praise, not from public wins, but from the private victories no one sees. You don't have to make a massive change overnight. You don't need to leap across a canyon. You just need to lay a brick, one honest, focused action at a time. One step that moves you a little closer to your goal, and then do it again and again. Even when you don't feel like it, even when it feels like no progress is being made, because that's how the foundation is built. That's how momentum is created. That's how real, grounded success becomes inevitable, not because you got lucky, not because you found a shortcut, but because you earned it. You built it, one move at a time. The wall you're building, the life you want, the person you're becoming, it's not built in a day. It's built daily. One of the most overlooked truths about success is that it often happens long before anyone else notices. It begins when no one is clapping, when no one is watching, when no one even knows what you're doing. That's the part no one really talks about, the silent victories, the quiet breakthroughs, the internal shifts that change everything, even though from the outside nothing seems different. We're so conditioned to associate success with recognition that we forget where it actually starts, deep within, far away from the spotlight. Think about any person who's achieved something meaningful. Before the world ever acknowledged their work, they had to believe in it first. They had to act without validation, to move forward when no one else understood their vision, to wake up and choose their path again and again, even when the results were invisible, even when their progress felt small, even when it felt like no one cared. And that takes something powerful. That takes belief. That takes intention. That takes inner strength. It's in those silent moments when you're working late, when you're training alone, when you're doubting yourself but showing up anyway, that the real magic happens. Because that's where character is forged. That's where resilience is built. You're not performing. You're not pretending. You're not chasing applause. You're doing the work for the sake of the work, because it matters to you, because it means something. And when you can anchor yourself in that, when your motivation comes from something internal, something deeper than recognition, then you become unstoppable. People often ask, how do I stay motivated when no one notices what I'm doing? And the answer is simple. You stop needing to be noticed. You stop giving your power away to the opinions of others. You start playing the long game. You understand that visibility doesn't equal value. That just because no one sees your progress yet doesn't mean it isn't happening. That just because your journey is quiet doesn't mean it isn't powerful. You start to realize that those silent victories, they're not small. They're everything. Saying no when it would have been easier to say yes, that's a win. Starting over after a setback, that's a win. Being honest with yourself when no one else would know if you weren't, that's a win. They don't come with trophies. No one posts about them, but they're what shape you. They're what prepare you for everything that's coming. And when the world finally does take notice, when the results begin to show and the recognition starts to arrive, you'll be ready. Not because of the spotlight, but because of everything you built when the lights were off. You'll be grounded, focused, stable, because your success wasn't born from applause, it was born from silence. It was earned in moments of self-doubt that you pushed through. It was earned through late nights and early mornings that no one ever saw. It was earned through showing up even when it felt like no one else cared. That's the foundation. That's what makes it real. Because success that relies on external approval is fragile. But success that's rooted in silent discipline, that's unshakable. That lasts. That's the kind of success that's not just impressive, it's meaningful. So don't wait for others to believe in you before you begin. They don't wait for the spotlight before you take the first step. The truth is, the most important steps will always be taken in the dark. The breakthrough doesn't happen when the world sees your value. It happens when you see it.